Emily stood silently by the window, a glass of red wine clutched loosely in her hand. Outside, the world seemed serene, calm, and peaceful, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside her. The night was like any other, except that tonight, everything she thought she knew would shatter within seconds. She had heard the door open, the sound of footsteps as Dylan stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind him, and he let out a sigh of relief, but something felt off. Emily couldn't quite place it, but there was a subtle change in the air. A dissonance she could feel more than hear. She turned slowly, trying to ignore the sudden tightness in her chest. Dylan had always been the one constant, the one person who made her feel safe in a chaotic world. They'd built a life together, a life she thought was solid and unshakable. And yet, tonight, everything felt different. "Hey," Dylan said, his voice tired but trying to sound upbeat. "I'm home." Emily didn't respond immediately. She merely watched him, her gaze steady, searching for something. But there was nothing in his eyes that resembled the warmth she once knew so well. His smile was there, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was as if a veil had descended between them, one that she couldn't lift. "Are you okay?" he asked, crossing the room to stand beside her. Emily set her wine down on the table, her fingers gripping the stem tightly. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. Before she spoke, her voice cold and controlled, though she could feel the tremor threatening to break through. "I saw it," she said, her words deliberate and slow, as if testing the weight of each syllable. Dylan's face faltered for just a second. That was all it took. "I don't know what you mean," he replied, his voice faltering now. She didn't need to say anything else. Her phone was still in her hand, its screen lit up with the image that had driven a wedge between her heart and mind. The image of Dylan, laughing, his arms wrapped around a woman Emily had never seen before. A woman who was certainly not her. It was taken in a place she didn't recognize, a place that wasn't their home. The betrayal, the lies, every single one of them, suddenly came crashing down on her. Emily held the phone out to him, watching the realization flash across his face as his eyes scanned the image. You don't understand," Dylan began, his voice growing defensive. "This isn't what you think." She didn't want to hear the excuses. The moment was too raw, too painful. Her chest tightened with every breath she took, her vision blurring with unshed tears that she refused to let fall. "I saw you, Dylan," she said, her voice trembling despite herself. "You've been lying to me. For how long? How long have you been doing this?" "With her." Dylan stood frozen for a moment, his mouth opening and closing as if he were searching for the right words, but nothing seemed to come. Emily didn't need words. She didn't need anything he had to say. The truth was in the picture, in his expression, and in the silence that stretched between them. He had betrayed her, and there was no denying it. "Emily, he started, his voice cracking with a mixture of guilt and frustration. "You don't understand. I needed something. I've been under so much pressure lately." "Needed something?" she repeated, her voice sharp now. "You're telling me you needed her?" Dylan looked away, his face flushed with shame, but Emily wasn't done. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, anger bubbling up, mixing with the heartbreak. "You think I'm some fool, don't you? You think I wouldn't figure it out?" "I may have trusted you, Dylan, but I'm not blind." He took a step forward, but Emily held up her hand, stopping him in his tracks. "Don't. Just don't." Her eyes burned with unshed tears, but she refused to cry in front of him. Not now. Not like this. She had given him everything, her trust, her love, her future, and he had shattered it with a single moment of weakness. Or maybe it wasn't weakness at all. Maybe it was just the person he had always been, a man who could hide his true nature behind a mask of charm and affection. Dylan opened his mouth again, but this time, Emily wasn't listening. She couldn't. She didn't want to hear his excuses, his apologies. Not after everything he had done. after everything she had seen. "I can't even look at you right now," Emily whispered, her voice barely above a breath. She took a step back, then another. Her entire body trembled as if she were standing on the edge of a cliff, her balance precarious. For a moment, she thought she might collapse, but she held herself upright. She had to. She wasn't going to let him see her break. Not tonight. Dylan remained silent, the weight of the moment settling over both of them. Neither one of them spoke. Emily didn't need him to speak, not anymore. She had the truth, and the truth was all she needed. She turned away from him, her footsteps heavy as she walked toward the door. Dylan called her name, but she didn't respond. She didn't have to. She already knew everything she needed to know. As she stepped into the hallway, the door closing softly behind her, she finally let herself breathe. The air seemed to press in on her chest, but it wasn't the weight of the betrayal that was suffocating her. No, it was the knowledge that she was free now, free from the man who had once been everything to her. And yet, despite the relief that came with that freedom, Emily felt an overwhelming sense of loss, of emptiness. How could she have been so blind? How could she have trusted someone who was so capable of lying to her? But deep down, she knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. Dylan might have broken her heart, but Emily was not going to stay broken for long. Her mind raced with questions, with doubts, with thoughts of what she was going to do next. She wasn't just going to move on from this. She was going to make sure that Dylan, and everyone else who had ever betrayed her, would never get away with it again. Her journey had only just begun. And no matter how hard it might be, she was going to take control of her own fate. The future, for the first time, was hers to shape. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The cold air of the night wrapped itself around Emily as she stepped into the empty hallway, her steps echoing softly in the otherwise quiet house. It felt as though the entire world had frozen, suspended in time. The echoes of Dylan's footsteps still lingered in her mind, though he had disappeared behind her, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She hadn't planned to leave like this. It wasn't the dramatic exit she had imagined in her countless moments of frustration. No, it was something else, a sudden realization that she could no longer live in the shadows of this broken marriage. She felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her, but also, strangely, a sense of relief. She paused at the top of the stairs, staring down at the empty space below. This house, which had once felt like home, now seemed foreign to her. She had invested so much into it, into them. The memories of late-night conversations, laughter shared over dinner, plans for the future, all of it felt like a distant dream now. And as much as she hated it, she couldn't help but replay those memories, clinging to the person she once thought she knew. The flashbacks came flooding back, uninvited yet unavoidable. It was a bright summer day when Emily first met Dylan. They were at a conference for tech innovators in San Francisco, two minds crossing paths in a crowded room full of the world's brightest minds. Emily had been presenting her work on artificial intelligence, a project she'd been tirelessly working on for years. She had expected to spend most of her time discussing algorithms, datasets, and the future of AI. Instead, she had found herself sitting across from Dylan, a tall man with a magnetic smile and a quiet intensity that immediately drew her in. He was there as a guest speaker, discussing the ethical implications of technology in the real world. His speech had been captivating, and his approach to AI was both thoughtful and pragmatic. Emily had never considered the more human aspects of the field until Dylan's words had struck a chord in her. After his talk, they had met for coffee in one of the conference's many side rooms. The conversation had flowed easily between them, with Dylan sharing stories of his work in tech startups and Emily recounting her passion for building machines that could think for themselves. They had connected immediately. Emily couldn't deny the attraction. There was something about the way he looked at her, something genuine and real that made her feel like she was the only person in the room. It was intoxicating. Over the next few months, they kept in touch, their conversations moving from emails to phone calls. Soon, their relationship blossomed into something more. Dylan was intelligent, ambitious, and most importantly, he made her feel seen in ways that no one else had. She admired his drive, his curiosity about the world, and his ability to talk about anything with such depth and insight. When they decided to move in together, it felt like the natural next step. They shared similar goals, a passion for technology, and a sense of purpose that bound them together. Dylan's world became Emily's world. His friends became hers. His family, her family. But somewhere along the way, things began to change. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the spark that had once been so bright began to flicker. The late-night discussions turned into quiet evenings. The laughter faded into silence. Emily had tried to ignore it. She had tried to convince herself that it was just the pressures of work, that they were both just too busy to pay attention to each other. But deep down, she knew. The cracks had started to form long before tonight. She closed her eyes, letting herself be swallowed by the memories of the past. She remembered how Dylan used to look at her when they first met, the admiration, the wonder. He used to say that she was the one person who could challenge him in ways no one else could. But those days felt like a lifetime ago now. "Do you think we're just drifting apart?" Emily had asked him one evening, sitting on their couch after a particularly quiet dinner. Dylan had looked at her, a furrow of concern creasing his brow. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Emily hesitated, feeling a sense of dread creeping into her voice. "I feel like we're not us anymore. We don't talk like we used to. You're always working, or out with your friends, or... I don't know. I just feel like I'm losing you." At the time, Dylan had shaken his head, dismissing her concerns with a smile. "You're overthinking it. Things are just hectic right now. We're fine." But Emily knew, even then, that something wasn't right. The warmth between them was fading, and no matter how hard she tried to keep it alive, she couldn't stop the inevitable. Now, standing in the hallway of their home, the memories of those warnings hit her like a punch to the gut. She had ignored all the signs, dismissed her own instincts, and now, here she was, standing at the edge of a broken relationship. A sudden noise brought her back to the present. It was just the wind, howling outside, but it felt as though the house itself was mourning the end of everything Emily had worked for. As the minutes stretched on, she stood there, processing the emotions flooding her system. She had known, deep down, that Dylan wasn't the man she thought he was. The fact that he had betrayed her in the most painful way possible didn't surprise her as much as it should have. But what did surprise her was the part of herself that was already starting to heal, already starting to feel like she could breathe again. She had spent so long trying to hold on to something that was slipping through her fingers. Now, with the weight of the betrayal fresh in her mind, she could finally let go. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was living in someone else's shadow. She could be herself again. The Emily before Dylan. The woman who had dreams, aspirations, and a future that wasn't bound by someone else's lies. "Are you okay?" A soft voice interrupted her thoughts, pulling her from her reverie. She turned to find her best friend, Rachel, standing in the doorway. She hadn't even noticed her enter. Rachel's concerned gaze searched Emily's face, and it didn't take long for her to see the raw pain behind Emily's eyes. "No," Emily whispered, shaking her head. "But I will be." As Rachel stepped closer, Emily could feel the weight of everything she had been holding back. The tears, the anger, the confusion, it was all there, but for the first time in a long time, Emily felt ready to face it. She wasn't going to let Dylan's betrayal define her. She wasn't going to let it ruin her. She had been a fool, but she wasn't a victim. It was time to take control. The early morning sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting a soft glow across Emily's bedroom. She hadn't slept much the night before, her mind replaying the events of the previous evening in an endless loop. The image of Dylan with the other woman was burned into her brain, each frame an agonizing reminder of the betrayal that had just shattered her world. But as the sun climbed higher, Emily knew she couldn't keep reliving the past. It was time to face the present, even if it felt like a steep hill to climb. The weight of the decisions she had to make pressed on her chest, but there was a fire inside her now, a quiet determination to take control of her own story. She ran her fingers through her hair and sat up, blinking away the remnants of sleep. The house around her was still, almost too still. Dylan had left last night after their confrontation, though she wasn't entirely sure where he'd gone. The fact that he hadn't tried to contact her again felt like another sign of how far their relationship had deteriorated. Not even an apology. Nothing. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, the sudden sound slicing through the silence. She picked it up without thinking, expecting to see a message from Rachel, but instead, it was a text from Dylan. Her heart skipped a beat, but she hesitated before opening it. She had no idea what he could possibly say after everything that had happened, but the curiosity gnawed at her. Dylan, I need to explain. Let me talk to you. Please. The words felt hollow, distant. Emily stared at the screen for a moment, feeling her blood pressure rise. She had no desire to hear his excuses. No part of her was interested in the narrative he was about to spin. But then something inside her clicked. A thought flashed in her mind, something she hadn't considered before. What if this wasn't just about betrayal? What if there was more to the story? Her mind raced, connecting dots that had never made sense before. She'd noticed small things over the past few months, things that, at the time, she had brushed off as quirks of their busy lives. Dylan's constant absences, the late nights at work, the mysterious phone calls, and the secretive behavior that seemed to intensify. Emily was no fool. She knew the signs. And yet, she had been too afraid to acknowledge them, too wrapped up in their life together to see the bigger picture. Why did he really do this? Her eyes narrowed as she typed a response. Emily. No. We need space. You need space to think. I need space to figure this out. Don't contact me again until I say so. With a final press of the send button, she felt the weight in her chest lighten ever so slightly. It wasn't the closure she wanted, but it was the start of something. She needed time to think, and she needed answers. Her mind refused to rest until she got them. Later that afternoon, Emily sat at her desk in her home office, the cool air from the open window doing little to ease the tension in her shoulders. The room, once a sanctuary of focus and productivity, now felt like a prison. She should have been working on her latest AI model, a project she had been passionate about for months, but instead, her thoughts kept circling back to Dylan and the mess he had made of their life together. She knew it was time to investigate, to uncover the truth that Dylan had kept hidden from her. She wasn't going to sit idly by and let him control the narrative. The more she thought about the situation, the more she realized how little she actually knew about his recent activities. It wasn't just the affair. It was everything else, the secrecy, the late nights, the new credit cards, the strange conversations she'd overheard when he thought she wasn't listening. The first thing she did was open the drawer where she kept their shared financial documents. Dylan had always taken care of the bills and accounts, something Emily had never minded, trusting him to handle the details while she focused on her career. But now, as she sifted through receipts, bank statements, and credit card bills, she began to see patterns that made her blood run cold. One particular charge caught her eye. A hefty sum, charged to a credit card she didn't recognize. The description read, "Rental property, 4th Avenue, New York City." Emily's stomach dropped. She'd never heard of a property on 4th Avenue, let alone that Dylan had rented one. It didn't make sense. He hadn't mentioned any business trips to New York. But there it was, staring her in the face. And then there was the fact that Dylan's business trips had started becoming more frequent. The longer he was gone, the more distant he had become. He'd always had work-related travel, but this was different. She remembered how his schedule had seemed increasingly erratic, with sudden meetings and quick trips, without any real explanation. Emily had tried to trust him, but in the back of her mind, she'd been unsettled by the change. Now, she realized the truth was far darker than she'd imagined. Emily knew she had to follow this trail. She wasn't just going to let Dylan waltz back into her life with a half-hearted apology. This was bigger than that. And whatever was hidden behind the veil of lies, she was determined to uncover it. Later that evening, Emily stood in front of the large mirror in her living room, her reflection staring back at her with an unfamiliar intensity. Her mind was made up. There was no turning back. She wasn't going to let this betrayal define her, but she needed answers, and she was going to get them no matter what it took. She grabbed her purse, slung it over her shoulder, and left the house. Her destination was clear now. She needed to confront the property on 4th Avenue to see what Dylan had been hiding. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about closure, about understanding why everything had gone so wrong. The city was quiet as Emily drove through the streets, her hands gripping the steering wheel with a quiet intensity. The closer she got to 4th Avenue, the more her heart raced. She had no idea what she was going to find, but she was done pretending she could ignore it. She was ready to face whatever truths waited for her. She parked a few blocks away and walked the rest of the way, feeling the weight of her decision with every step. As she neared the building that Dylan had rented, she felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She was standing on the edge of a precipice, and she had no idea what she might uncover. The building looked just like any other in this part of the city, modern, sleek, with glass windows reflecting the fading light of the day. Emily took a deep breath before entering the lobby, the chill of the air-conditioned space sending a shiver down her spine. She approached the front desk, where a young receptionist was typing on a computer. "Hi," Emily said, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. "I'm looking for a unit rented under the name Dylan Matthews. Can you help me with that?" The receptionist glanced up, her face neutral. "Of course. Let me check the records for you." As the woman tapped on her keyboard, Emily's mind raced. She had no idea what kind of response she was expecting, but this felt like the beginning of something much bigger than she had anticipated. The receptionist looked up after a moment, her brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, but I'm unable to find anything under that name. Are you sure about the details?" Emily's chest tightened. "Dylan Matthews," she repeated, her voice now colder. "He rented a unit here. I need to know which one." The receptionist hesitated, and then, as if struck by something, she spoke again, more quietly. "There's a name in the system, but it's not under Dylan Matthews. It's under a different name entirely." Emily's heart skipped a beat. The receptionist's words echoed in Emily's mind long after she left the building. There was a name in the system, but not Dylan Matthews. No, it was someone else entirely. A cold shiver ran down her spine, and the air around her seemed to grow heavier, as if the universe itself were conspiring to keep this truth hidden. Her mind was spinning, trying to piece together the puzzle. Who could this other person be? Someone Dylan had been involved with? Someone who wasn't even on her radar? The possibilities felt endless, but the urgency in Emily's chest told her one thing: she had to know. The receptionist had been reluctant to give her any more details, but Emily's determination had driven her to press harder. She had managed to gather a name, though the receptionist had seemed hesitant to share it: Sophia Reyes. The name meant nothing to Emily. She didn't know a Sophia, and she certainly didn't know a Sophia connected to Dylan. But that was all she had: one name, one lead, and a sinking feeling in her gut. Emily drove back home in a daze, her thoughts racing as the city lights blurred past. She wasn't sure what to do with the new information. Should she confront Dylan? Should she track down this woman? The questions seemed to grow heavier with each mile. But one thing was clear. There were layers to this betrayal, and she needed to peel them back, one by one. When she finally arrived at her house, the sun had set, and the darkness of the evening mirrored the heaviness in her heart. She stood outside for a moment, looking up at the house that had once felt like a sanctuary but now felt like a foreign land. She was no longer the woman who had trusted Dylan. She wasn't sure who she was anymore, but she couldn't stay frozen in place. She had to keep moving forward. She grabbed her phone from her bag and searched for the name Sophia Reyes. There were a few results, mostly linked to social media profiles and a few mentions in business articles. Emily clicked on one of the links, a photo of Sophia from a corporate event, dressed in a sharp suit, her expression confident and poised. Emily's heart skipped. The woman was beautiful, and everything about her screamed power, control, and confidence, qualities Dylan had always admired in others. There was an unease settling over her as she scrolled through more photos. Sophia seemed to have it all: perfect looks, an accomplished career, and a life that appeared flawless. Emily couldn't help but wonder, was this the woman Dylan had been seeing behind her back? Was she the one who had captured his attention and, perhaps, his heart? As Emily scrolled further, a single post caught her eye, something that sent a chill through her entire body. It was a photo of Sophia at a conference. The caption read, "Excited to announce our new partnership with a leader in AI development." It was a name she recognized instantly: Dylan Matthews. A wave of nausea hit Emily as she stared at the post. The dots were connecting now. Dylan had known Sophia through work. They were connected professionally, but the fact that they were partners in something bigger, that was new information. Emily knew her husband had been heavily involved in business partnerships in the tech world, but she had no idea that this woman, this stranger, was so central to his professional life. The implication was clear: Sophia was more than just a colleague. The relationship was personal. And the reality of that hit Emily harder than anything she had ever felt before. It wasn't until late that night that Emily finally sat down with her laptop, staring at the name Sophia Reyes again. She had been pacing around the house for hours, her thoughts spiraling. But now she knew what she had to do. She had to confront this woman. She couldn't keep waiting for Dylan to tell her the truth. It was time to take matters into her own hands. She typed out a message on LinkedIn, the only platform where Sophia's profile seemed active. "Hi, Sophia. I'm Emily Matthews. I know this is going to sound strange, but I need to speak with you about something important. Could you please reach out to me at your earliest convenience?" Emily stared at the message for a long moment, her finger hovering over the send button. What was she doing? Could she really go through with this? But then she thought about everything Dylan had kept hidden from her, the lies, the secrets, the betrayals, and she clicked send. She sat back, her stomach in knots. Now it was out of her hands. She could only wait and see if Sophia would respond. Part of her hoped she wouldn't. But the other part, the part that was done being in the dark, was desperate for answers, for closure. For something that made sense. The next morning, Emily's phone buzzed just as she was about to leave the house. She nearly dropped it in shock when she saw the message. Sophia Reyes. "Hi, Emily. I understand this must be difficult for you. I'm sorry for the situation you're in. Dylan and I have been working together closely for the past year. I'm not sure what else you'd like to know, but I'll do my best to answer your questions." The words felt like a punch to the gut. Emily had hoped for an explanation, anything that might shed light on the tangled web Dylan had woven. But this was unexpected. Sophia was apologizing. She wasn't trying to deflect blame or make excuses. The tone of the message was sincere, almost regretful. Emily's fingers trembled as she typed her response. Emily Matthews. Dylan and I have been married for 7 years. I have every right to know what's going on. How long has this been going on between you two? And why didn't you tell me? The response came swiftly. Sophia Reyes. I never meant to hurt you. This started a few months ago after Dylan came to me for professional advice. He's always been a bit secretive, but I never wanted things to escalate like this. I'm sorry for my part in it, but I'm not sure how to undo the damage that's already been done. Emily stared at the message, her mind racing. A few months ago? This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just about Dylan and his infidelity. There were layers to this that Emily hadn't anticipated. The relationship with Sophia wasn't born out of an affair, at least not purely. It had started under the guise of professionalism. And yet, Emily knew deep down that it had crossed a line into something more. She took a deep breath, steadying herself as she prepared to respond. There were so many questions, so many emotions bubbling up. But the one that stuck out the most, why? Why had Dylan, the man she had trusted with everything, allowed this to happen? Why hadn't he been honest with her? Emily Matthews. I don't know if I can forgive either of you, but I deserve the truth. I'll be meeting with Dylan soon, and I want him to explain this. If you're truly sorry, you'll stay out of it from here on out. Emily hit send, but for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the crushing weight of uncertainty. She was getting closer. She was gaining control over her life once more. But the final confrontation with Dylan, the man who had shattered everything she once held dear, was still looming. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days after Emily's conversation with Sophia felt like a slow-motion blur, her mind caught in a whirlwind of disbelief and anger. Each time she tried to focus on her work or even engage in a conversation with a friend, her thoughts kept drifting back to the same place. The affair, the lies, the betrayal. But something about Sophia's apology still lingered in her mind. Was it genuine? Or was she simply trying to salvage whatever semblance of respectability remained? But Emily didn't have time to dwell on that. She had made up her mind. The next step was clear. She had to face Dylan. He owed her the truth, no matter how ugly it was. She spent the next few days preparing for the inevitable confrontation. She'd known Dylan long enough to understand how he would try to control the narrative. He would apologize profusely, possibly even beg for her forgiveness, but Emily wasn't ready to let him off that easily. She needed answers. She needed to understand why, and not just the surface-level excuses. On the evening of the confrontation, Emily dressed carefully, choosing a simple black dress that made her feel both composed and strong. As she slipped it on, she studied herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was different from the one Dylan had known. She wasn't the naive, trusting wife anymore. She had seen through the veil of his deception, and she was ready to reclaim her life. The doorbell rang at precisely 7:30 p.m. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Dylan. The moment she had been dreading and anticipating was here. She took a deep breath and opened the door. Dylan stood there, looking every bit the image of a man who had been caught in his own web of lies. His once confident demeanor was replaced with uncertainty. He wasn't the man who had swept her off her feet all those years ago. No, this version of Dylan was a stranger, a man who had failed her. Emily, he said softly, his voice tinged with regret. You don't get to start with an apology, Emily interrupted, her voice calm but unwavering. Not this time. I'm not interested in what you have to say until I get the truth. He stepped back, clearly taken aback by her directness. What truth? Emily didn't mince words. The truth about everything. The affair. Your secret business dealings. Your lies. I know about the property on 4th Avenue. I know about Sophia. And I know this wasn't just some casual fling, Dylan. This has been going on for months. She watched as his face paled. His eyes darted to the floor for a moment before meeting hers again, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of guilt. Emily, please, he began, but she could see it in his eyes. He wasn't ready to admit the full extent of what had been going on. I never meant to hurt you. It got out of hand. Got out of hand? Emily repeated, her voice rising. You didn't just accidentally fall into an affair, Dylan. This wasn't some mistake you made while you were stressed at work. You chose this. Over and over again. Dylan looked away, running a hand through his hair. I never meant for things to go this far. I thought I could handle it, but… Handle it? Emily scoffed. You thought you could handle destroying everything we've built? You thought you could juggle a marriage and a secret relationship and keep it all hidden? You underestimated me, Dylan. You didn't think I'd ever find out, did you? His silence was all the confirmation she needed. I want to know why, Emily said, her voice lower now, but steady. Why her? Why did you let it go this far? What were you looking for, Dylan? What was missing in our life? Dylan shifted uncomfortably, his gaze flickering to the side before settling back on her. It wasn't about you, Emily. You have to understand that. This was about me, about my own insecurities, my own fears. I was looking for something that made me feel alive. Something that wasn't just the routine of our life together. And Sophia, she understood that. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat. So, you used her to fill some void? You used her to make you feel something? What about me, Dylan? What about the woman who stood by you, believed in you, trusted you? His eyes filled with a mix of guilt and frustration. I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt you, Emily. Then why did you do it? Her voice cracked on the last word, betraying the emotions she had so carefully kept buried. Why didn't you just talk to me? Why didn't you tell me when you started feeling disconnected? Why did you hide it, Dylan? I was afraid, he admitted, his voice almost a whisper. I was afraid of losing you. I thought that if I told you the truth, it would break us. And I didn't want to lose everything we had. But in trying to protect it, I destroyed it. Emily took a step back, her mind whirling. The man standing before her wasn't the one she thought she knew. The man she had trusted had made a series of selfish choices that had now torn apart their marriage. His words, his admission of fear, it didn't make the pain any less. It didn't undo the betrayal. You could have come to me, she said softly, her voice trembling. I would have worked through it with you. We could have figured it out, Dylan. But you didn't trust me enough to do that. Instead, you chose this. You chose her. Dylan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. A bitter silence settled between them. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Emily was torn between a rush of anger and the deep ache of disappointment. This wasn't just about a woman, a physical affair. It was about betrayal at its deepest level. It was about losing the trust and the love they had once shared. Emily exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the years of their marriage press down on her. The love was still there, buried beneath the layers of hurt. But the trust, the foundation of their relationship, had crumbled. And that was something that couldn't be easily repaired. I need space, Emily said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. I need time to think, Dylan. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I can't keep doing this right now. I need you to leave. He stared at her, his face a mask of confusion and regret. Emily, please, I'll fix this. I'll do anything. But she shook her head. You can't fix it. You've broken something, and it's not something that can be repaired with apologies. Dylan's face crumbled, but he didn't fight her. He turned and left without another word, and Emily was left standing alone in the hallway, her body numb, her mind swirling with thoughts she couldn't yet process. As she stood there, she realized something. She hadn't just confronted Dylan. She had confronted the version of herself that had let this happen. She wasn't the woman who would sit back and wait to be hurt anymore. She was stronger than that. And no matter what came next, she would survive this. She would heal. And she would move on whether Dylan did or not. But the question still lingered in the air, unanswered. What now? The days following the confrontation with Dylan passed in a haze. Emily spent most of her time in the house, navigating the space that had once felt like a sanctuary but now felt cold and alien. She moved mechanically through her routine, making coffee, answering emails, doing laundry, but nothing felt real. Everything she once knew had been upended, and now she was left to rebuild herself from the ground up. Dylan had tried calling a few times, sending apologetic texts, but Emily ignored them all. She didn't need his words anymore. She had heard enough of them. The anger had settled into something more potent, an emptiness. But it was a controlled emptiness. For the first time in years, Emily was no longer consumed by the need to please, to fix, or to make things right for everyone around her. The quiet was deafening, but in it, she found space to think, to breathe, and, finally, to see herself. Not as Dylan's wife, not as the woman who had been betrayed, but as Emily, the person she had lost track of over the years. One afternoon, while she was sorting through some old boxes in the attic, Emily stumbled upon a scrapbook. It was a collection of their early years together, pictures from their wedding, holidays, and moments that once seemed mundane but now felt distant. As she flipped through the pages, she felt a strange mix of nostalgia and pain. The love that had once felt so vibrant between them now seemed like a fleeting dream, a story she had read and forgotten. But there was something else she noticed too, her own evolution. The woman in the pictures was filled with a kind of innocence that Emily could hardly recognize. She had been so sure of herself, so hopeful about the future. And somewhere along the way, that version of herself had slipped through the cracks. The woman standing in front of the scrapbook now was stronger, more aware, more skeptical, but the foundation was still there. That spark of self was still inside her, waiting to be reignited. As she closed the scrapbook, she felt a new sense of clarity. This was the moment where she chose herself. That night, after a long day of reflection, Emily decided to reach out. Not to Dylan, but to Sophia. Sophia Reyes. Hi, Emily. I hope you're doing okay. I know you must have a lot of questions, and I'm here if you want to talk. Emily stared at the message for a long moment, her finger hovering over the reply button. She hadn't expected Sophia to reach out again, but the woman had always been more transparent than Dylan, in a strange way. Emily had been prepared for a defensive response, or perhaps silence, but instead, there was an openness, a willingness to engage. Emily Matthews. I need to know something. I want to understand the nature of your relationship with Dylan. How did it all start? The response came almost instantly. Sophia Reyes. It started professionally, Emily. I know that sounds like an excuse, but it's the truth. Dylan came to me for guidance, business advice, strategy, things like that. I never thought it would turn into what it did. And I never meant for you to get hurt. But yes, we crossed a line. And I'll take responsibility for that. Emily felt a sharp pang in her chest. Sophia was taking responsibility. Dylan never had. But even though the words were coming from Sophia, they didn't feel like enough. Nothing could undo the damage that had been done. But Emily wasn't reaching out for closure. Not yet. Emily Matthews. Was this about the business? Or was it something else? You were both so secretive. Sophia Reyes. It was never just about the business. Dylan and I were both trying to escape something. I can't speak for him, but I can tell you that he was struggling, and maybe I was too. But none of this justifies the betrayal. I'm sorry, Emily. The honesty in Sophia's words surprised Emily. But the question she really wanted answered still hung in the air. Emily Matthews. Do you love him? Sophia didn't reply immediately. The silence stretched long, and for a moment, Emily wondered if she would just leave it at that, if Sophia would ignore the question or brush it aside. But the response came, honest and vulnerable. Sophia Reyes. I think I did. But I was also blinded by the thrill, the excitement of it. I wanted to feel important, wanted, like I mattered to someone. But I see now that it wasn't real. It was all a distraction. And I'm sorry, Emily. I truly am. Emily didn't know what to say to that. Part of her wanted to lash out, to demand more answers. But part of her just wanted to close the chapter, to put it behind her. The only thing she could do now was move forward. Emily Matthews. I don't know if I can forgive you, but I appreciate your honesty. That night, Emily finally broke her silence with Dylan. Her phone buzzed late, around midnight, and she saw his name flashing on the screen. She had avoided him for so long that even the sight of his name brought a mixture of anger and fear. But now she was ready. She answered the call. Emily. Dylan's voice was shaky. I've been trying to reach you. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But please, just listen to me. I've listened enough, Emily replied coolly. I don't want to hear your excuses anymore. I've spent the last few days thinking, and I realized something. I'm done trying to fix this. Emily, please, don't say that. Dylan's voice cracked, his desperation palpable. No, Emily interrupted. You don't get to beg anymore. You don't get to manipulate me into feeling guilty for wanting something better for myself. I gave you everything, Dylan, and you threw it all away. You don't get to come back and make this right just because you feel bad now. I'm not the same person who needed your validation anymore. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Dylan didn't speak. He didn't know what to say, and Emily wasn't going to offer him the chance to make things right. He had lost that privilege long ago. I'm done, Emily repeated, the weight of those words heavy but freeing. You don't have to contact me again. This is over. She ended the call, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over her. The ties that had bound her to Dylan for so long had finally been severed, and in their place, she felt a new sense of possibility, of freedom. The next few days passed in a blur, but it was different now. Emily had given herself permission to start fresh. She no longer waited for the apology or the reconciliation that would never come. She started looking into new business ventures, started picking up old hobbies she had abandoned, and began taking small steps toward rediscovering the woman she used to be. It wasn't going to be easy. She knew that. The scars of the betrayal would linger, but she was learning how to heal. One day at a time. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was hers to choose. And for the first time in a long time, Emily wasn't afraid of the unknown. The weeks that followed Emily's decision were a mix of calm and chaos. She found herself navigating the uncertainty of what was next, trying to piece together the shattered fragments of her life. There were moments of peace where she found solace in her own company, quiet mornings spent journaling, long walks through the city to clear her mind, and evenings spent in the comfort of a glass of wine and her favorite books. But then, there were moments where the weight of the betrayal hit her like a wave, and she'd find herself gasping for air, the sting of Dylan's actions fresh, as if they'd just happened. But through it all, Emily kept moving forward. She had learned, through all the heartache, that she couldn't rely on anyone else to fix things for her. No one could repair the damage but herself. And she wasn't about to let this be the end of her story. But life had a funny way of throwing curveballs. It was a Thursday evening when the phone call came. Emily had just finished a meeting with a potential new client for her consulting business and was making dinner when her phone rang. The number wasn't familiar, but something about it nagged at her. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it was the feeling that the past wasn't done with her yet, but she answered the call. Hello. Emily, it's me. Dylan. Her heart skipped a beat. His voice sounded different, strained, urgent. What do you want, Dylan? She replied coolly, though her voice betrayed a tinge of emotion she couldn't control. She had blocked him out for weeks, but hearing his voice still had the power to unsettle her. I need you to hear me out. Please, he begged. I've made a mistake, and I know you don't want to talk to me, but this can't wait. Emily stood frozen in the kitchen, knife still in hand, her heart pounding in her chest. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't been prepared for him to come back into her life like this. You've had your chance, Dylan, she said, trying to maintain the calm she'd worked so hard to cultivate. I'm done. I told you that. Emily, listen to me, he said, his voice a low, almost desperate whisper. This isn't about us. Not anymore. It's about something bigger. Something I've found out that could change everything. Emily's brows furrowed. What are you talking about? There was a long pause, followed by a deep breath on his end. It's Sophia. You have to know the truth about her. She's not who she says she is. Emily felt a sharp pang in her chest. She wasn't sure what she was expecting, but this wasn't it. What do you mean? What is it about her? Dylan's voice dropped lower. I don't know all the details, but I've been digging. After everything blew up, I found some things. Some things about Sophia's past that don't add up. She's been hiding things, Emily. And I think she has a plan. A bigger plan than just you and me. Emily's mind raced. She had never truly trusted Sophia. She'd only allowed herself to believe the woman was a product of Dylan's insecurities, a momentary lapse in judgment. But this felt different. What kind of plan? What are you talking about, Dylan? She asked, trying to keep the edge of panic out of her voice. I'm not sure, but I've been doing some research. I know she's been involved in business things that I think have a direct connection to some of the deals I've been working on. I think she might be using me, or worse, using you. Emily felt her stomach drop. No, I don't believe you. Why should I believe you after everything you've done? I'm not asking you to believe me just yet, he said quickly. But I've seen enough to know something's wrong. I don't think this was ever about us, Emily. I think we were just pawns in her game. The words hung in the air between them like a threat. For a moment, Emily's mind spiraled. Dylan was a liar, of that much she was certain. But what if, just what if, there was some truth in what he was saying? What if Sophia wasn't who she appeared to be? I don't know if I can trust you anymore, Emily said, her voice hardening. But if what you're saying is true, then we need to figure this out together. Dylan's voice was tentative, like he wasn't sure how she would respond. I can't do this alone, Emily. You know I've made mistakes, but we need to figure this out before she does something we can't undo. Emily felt a chill run through her. A part of her wanted to hang up the phone and never think about any of this again. She didn't want to get sucked back into the mess that had destroyed her marriage. But the other part of her, the part that had always trusted her instincts, was telling her something wasn't right. There was more to the story. And for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of purpose, something that could propel her forward into a new direction. She took a deep breath. Fine, she said, her voice steady. I'll meet you. But understand this, Dylan. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for myself. I want the truth, and I'm not stopping until I get it. The next morning, Emily met Dylan at a small cafe, the kind they used to frequent when they were still happy. The place smelled of freshly brewed coffee and baked pastries, but it only reminded her of the life they used to have. She couldn't afford to look back anymore. Not now. Dylan was waiting at a corner booth, looking disheveled, his eyes bloodshot like he hadn't slept in days. As soon as he saw her, he stood up, but Emily didn't immediately sit. She wanted to establish control over this conversation. She wasn't the same woman who had sat across from him in this booth years ago, pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. Tell me everything, Emily said, her voice firm. Dylan hesitated, glancing around as if ensuring no one was listening. Then, he slid an envelope across the table toward her. Emily didn't move to open it at first. She studied his face, trying to gauge if he was telling the truth. These are files I found, he said quietly. I started digging into Sophia's business dealings after we talked. I thought I was crazy at first, but it's all connected. Her past, her business connections, they go way deeper than I realized. Emily's pulse quickened, but she didn't reach for the envelope just yet. What kind of connections? I can't explain all of it right now, Dylan said, his voice tense. But she's been involved with people who, well, let's just say they aren't exactly law-abiding. And I'm pretty sure she's been manipulating us both, making sure we stay distracted while she moves forward with whatever plan she has. Emily reached for the envelope. She didn't know if she should trust Dylan, but if there was any truth in what he was saying, she needed to know. She needed to be sure. She opened the envelope slowly and pulled out a stack of papers, photographs, and documents. Her breath caught in her throat as she scanned through the contents. Names, addresses, and connections to companies she didn't recognize. And in the middle of it all, one name stood out to her: Reed Investments, a company that had been in the news recently for its shady financial dealings. "This can't be real," she whispered to herself. "It is," Dylan said. "And I think Sophia has been involved with them for years. I think she might have been using both of us to cover her tracks." Emily's world tilted again. She was on the verge of something big. But this revelation didn't bring her the relief she thought it would. Instead, it left her with more questions. The days after the meeting with Dylan were a blur. Emily had spent hours poring over the documents Dylan had given her, her eyes scanning every name, every figure, every piece of evidence. But the more she dug, the more confused she became. The connections between Sophia, Reed Investments, and the shady figures in the business world grew clearer, but the picture as a whole remained out of focus. It didn't make sense. If Sophia was involved with these people, why had she seemed so earnest in her apologies to Emily? Why had she seemed so genuinely remorseful? And yet, the weight of the evidence was undeniable. The deeper Emily went, the more it became apparent that Sophia wasn't just a victim in this story. She was a player in a much larger, much more dangerous game. The following Friday, Emily found herself walking through the streets of downtown, her mind racing. The fresh air did little to clear her head, and the city's usual hum felt distant, muffled by the storm of thoughts swirling within her. She wasn't sure where she was going, but she needed answers, and she needed them fast. As she passed a small bookstore on the corner, something caught her eye: an old, familiar sign in the window. It was a bookstore that she and Dylan had frequented when they were still dating, a quiet little shop with cozy chairs and old books stacked high. They had spent hours there, lost in the worlds of the stories, just the two of them, before everything had become so complicated. She stepped inside, letting the scent of leather-bound books and old paper fill her lungs. The place hadn't changed. The same soft jazz played in the background, and the same owner, Mr. Jenkins, was behind the counter, a friendly smile on his face as he noticed her enter. "Emily, my dear," he said warmly. "Haven't seen you around in a while. Have you been?" She forced a smile, nodding politely. "I've been okay, just a lot going on." Of course. Life has a way of doing that to all of us." Mr. Jenkins paused, his eyes softening. "Anything I can help you find today?" Emily hesitated, her gaze flickering around the shelves, feeling like a stranger in a place that used to feel like home. She needed something to anchor her. "Actually, I was looking for something. A book. About business. Or finance." Mr. Jenkins raised an eyebrow. I see. You've been busy in the business world, huh? Well, I may have just the thing for you." He led her to a section in the back of the store, filled with old business books, the kind that most people overlooked in favor of more modern reads. But it was one particular book that caught her attention, a thick, leather-bound tome, its cover embossed with the title, "The Hidden Economy: Secrets of Corporate Power." Emily's hand hovered over it for a moment before she reached down and pulled it from the shelf. There was something about it, something that felt important. "Interesting choice," Mr. Jenkins said, watching her closely. "That book's not something you see every day. But I suppose if you're looking into something specific, it might help." Emily wasn't sure why, but she felt the urge to buy it. Maybe it was just a distraction. Maybe it was the growing curiosity about how all of these pieces, Sophia, Reed Investments, Dylan's secrets, fit together. Whatever the reason, she paid for the book and left the store, her mind churning with questions. Later that evening, she sat in her living room, flipping through the pages of the book. The first few chapters were dense with jargon, discussions about financial systems, global market manipulation, and insider trading, but as she moved deeper into the text, she found something unexpected. A chapter titled The Puppeteers, How Corporate Leaders Control the Strings of Power, immediately caught her attention. She read through the chapter quickly, her pulse quickening as she came across a section about the web of influence that controlled major financial markets and international companies. The names listed in the chapter were unfamiliar at first, but as she read further, she started to see patterns emerge. One name, in particular, stood out: Reed Enterprises, the parent company of Reed Investments, the one that Dylan had uncovered in the documents. But the book suggested something more sinister. Reed Enterprises wasn't just a corporation. It was a central player in a much larger underground network, one that used its financial influence to manipulate governments, fund illicit operations, and keep its dealings hidden from the public eye. Emily's mind raced as the pieces clicked into place. She had always known that the world of business was cutthroat, but this was something different, something much darker. And as she kept reading, the realization settled in her stomach like lead. Sophia's involvement with Reed Enterprises wasn't an accident. It wasn't some random affair. Sophia had been playing a much bigger game than Emily had ever realized. The phone buzzed on the table, snapping Emily out of her thoughts. It was a message from Sophia, the first one in weeks. Sophia Reyes. I need to see you. Can we talk? It's important. Emily stared at the message, her mind racing. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to cut ties completely. But the other part, the part that still sought answers, couldn't let it go. Sophia knew things. She had to. And Emily needed to know how deep this went. She responded, her fingers typing quickly. Emily Matthews. When and where? Sophia Reyes. Tomorrow. 11 a.m. The park near your old place. Emily didn't hesitate. She knew what she had to do. The next morning, Emily arrived at the park, a chill in the air that matched the unease swirling inside her. The park had once been a place of comfort, where she and Dylan had spent lazy afternoons, strolling hand in hand under the shade of the old oak trees. But now it felt like a battlefield. She wasn't sure if she was walking toward reconciliation or betrayal. She spotted Sophia almost immediately. The other woman was sitting on a bench by the lake, looking out over the water. Her posture was tense, her body language guarded. She was wearing a dark jacket, the collar turned up, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Emily, Sophia said, looking up as Emily approached. There was no warmth in her tone, no familiarity, only something that resembled an apology, but it was wrapped in something far more complicated. Emily sat down beside her, but kept a careful distance. What do you want, Sophia? I know you don't trust me, Sophia began, her voice steady but filled with an underlying urgency. But there's something you need to understand. Everything I didn't do it for me. I did it for us. For us. Emily scoffed. You slept with my husband. You used me, Sophia. You don't get to say, for us. Sophia flinched but didn't look away. You don't understand. I didn't want to hurt you. But this, what's coming next, it's bigger than us. Than me. Than you. Emily's heart pounded as the words sunk in. What's coming next? Sophia looked around, as if to make sure no one was listening. Then, in a low voice, she said, Reed Enterprises isn't just about money. It's about control. And I'm in too deep now. I tried to warn you. Dylan tried to warn you, but it's already happening. They're pulling the strings. And if we don't act fast, we'll be too late. Emily's mind raced, her thoughts spinning like a tornado. What do you mean act? What are you asking me to do? Sophia's gaze met hers, and for the first time, Emily saw the fear in her eyes. We need to stop them, Emily. before they destroy everything. The walk back from the park felt like a journey to nowhere, as if Emily were walking through a fog that had no end. Her mind kept returning to Sophia's words, "They're pulling the strings. And if we don't act fast, we'll be too late." The weight of it pressed down on her, suffocating her every thought, every breath. What did Sophia mean by act? And more importantly, what did she want from Emily? Could she truly trust her, or was this another trap? Her instincts were screaming at her to walk away, to cut ties with everyone involved and never look back. But then there was the other side of her, the part that couldn't shake the feeling that she was meant to be part of something bigger, to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. What if everything I've been told is a lie? She thought. As she arrived home, she locked the door behind her, almost as if to keep the world at bay. Her hands were shaking as she placed her bag down on the counter. She needed a moment to breathe, to think clearly. She poured herself a glass of wine, her eyes staring blankly out of the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. It wasn't until she caught a glimpse of the leather-bound book on the coffee table that she realized she had been holding her breath. The Hidden Economy. Her mind flitted back to the chapter she'd read about Reed Enterprises and the underground networks pulling the strings of global power. There was something more she needed to understand. More to this than just personal betrayal. She picked up the book and began to skim through it once again. This time, her eyes were drawn to a passage she'd overlooked earlier. It talked about corporate espionage, blackmail, and how companies like Reed Enterprises used personal leverage to manipulate key players in the game. They didn't just deal in money, they dealt in secrets. And those secrets were what kept their power intact. Emily felt a chill creep up her spine. She had a sinking feeling that she was no longer just dealing with the wreckage of her marriage. She was stepping into something far more dangerous. She texted Sophia, her fingers hesitating over the screen. "Emily Matthews. What exactly do you want me to do?" Sophia replied almost immediately, the message terse but loaded with meaning. "Sophia Reyes. You can't back out now. If we don't act soon, they'll bury us, me, you, everyone who's gotten too close. I'll explain more when you're ready. I need you, Emily. I can't do this alone." Her fingers hovered over the phone, unsure of her next move. Sophia wasn't begging, but there was a desperation in her words that couldn't be ignored. She didn't want to admit it, but Emily knew, deep down, she was already too far in to walk away. With a sigh, she set the phone down and walked to her small office. The room was quiet, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen the only sound breaking the stillness. She opened her laptop and began searching for more information on Reed Enterprises. The deeper she dug, the darker the web became. The company had a well-established reputation, but the more obscure connections were harder to trace. However, there were whispers. Articles with anonymous sources, testimonials from former employees, all suggesting that the company had a hand in everything from lobbying to bribery, from politics to international trade. What had started as an affair was now something much larger. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for truth, for accountability. But the question remained, could she trust Sophia? Could she even trust Dylan? Or was she just a pawn in a much bigger game? Hours passed, and Emily's eyes were starting to blur with exhaustion. She closed the laptop and leaned back in her chair. Her head was heavy, but her mind kept racing. The words, "they'll bury us," echoed in her mind like a warning. Then, her phone buzzed again. "Dylan, I need to talk to you. It's about Sophia." Emily stared at the screen for a moment, the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. She knew she couldn't keep running from the truth. There were too many pieces of this puzzle scattered around, and if she didn't put them together soon, she would lose everything. The next morning, Emily drove to meet Dylan at a small cafe they used to frequent. It was a quiet spot, far from the noise of their past life. Dylan was already there, sitting at a corner table, his face pale and drawn. He looked up as she approached, but there was no smile, no warmth. His eyes were hard, and for the first time, Emily saw a hint of fear there. "Sit," he said, his voice low. "I don't have much time. And neither do you." Emily didn't take her seat right away. She stood across from him, arms folded, waiting for him to continue. "What is it, Dylan?" she asked, trying to keep the edge out of her voice. "What do you want?" "I've been talking to someone." "Someone who knows Sophia," he said, his voice shaky. "And they know a lot more than I realized. This isn't just about Reed Enterprises. It's bigger. This whole thing, everything you're involved in, Sophia's part in it, it's not just business. It's political. They have ties to people in high places, and they won't stop until they've crushed everyone who's gotten in their way." Emily's stomach lurched. "What do you mean, political? What are you talking about?" "People. Powerful people. People who've been using Reed Enterprises for their own agenda." "And Sophia," Dylan trailed off, swallowing hard. "She's been working for them all along." Emily felt her pulse quicken. "What are you trying to say?" Dylan looked her in the eye. "I don't know how deep this goes, but I'm telling you now, we can't trust anyone. Not Sophia. Not Reed Enterprises. They'll do anything to protect themselves. And if you keep digging, if you keep pursuing this, you're putting yourself in danger." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their meaning. Emily didn't speak for a long time. Her mind was working through the puzzle, piecing together the fragmented clues. Dylan's warnings, Sophia's cryptic messages, it was all starting to make sense. Finally, she spoke. "Then what do we do, Dylan? What do we do now?" Dylan leaned forward, his eyes filled with urgency. "We take them down. But we have to move fast. If we're going to do this, we have to be careful. We can't just run in blindly." Emily took a deep breath, the weight of his words settling in her chest. This was it. She couldn't walk away anymore. She had already stepped too far into the dark, and there was no turning back. "All right," she said, her voice steady. "We do this together. But on one condition." Dylan looked at her, confusion flashing across his face. "What condition?" "I do it my way," she said, her voice firm. "I won't be anyone's pawn again. I'll take them down, but I'll do it on my terms." Dylan stared at her for a long moment before nodding slowly. "All right. My way, your way. Let's bring them down." The days after her conversation with Dylan felt like a blur of strategy meetings, anxious moments, and quiet realizations. Emily's life had become a carefully orchestrated series of decisions, each one leading her further down a path she knew she could never return from. The moment she agreed to take down Reed Enterprises, her life had shifted. There was no going back. Her phone buzzed again, and it was a message from Sophia. Emily's stomach churned, a mix of anger and fear brewing inside her. She had agreed to meet with Sophia earlier that morning, but she didn't expect the urgency that came with this text. "Sophia Reyes. They know. We have to act now. If we don't, they'll take us all down. Meet me tonight, same place as before. It's urgent." A knot formed in Emily's chest. They know, the words echoed in her mind, a dark, ominous warning. She couldn't afford to trust Sophia completely, not after everything that had happened, but Emily also couldn't ignore the gravity of what she was saying. There was no time to waste. That evening, Emily stood in front of her apartment building, the air thick with the tension of everything that had been building up. Her mind was still reeling from the recent revelations, Dylan's warnings, Sophia's message, and everything she had uncovered about Reed Enterprises. Each new piece of the puzzle was making the whole picture clearer, but also more terrifying. Was this really the fight she wanted? As Emily walked toward the park, the familiar path beneath her feet felt surreal. Every step was a reminder of how much had changed. The park was empty when she arrived, and she took a moment to breathe deeply, trying to steady her nerves. Sophia was already there, sitting on the same bench by the lake, her figure silhouetted by the dimming twilight. She was alone, her posture tense as if she was waiting for someone. Emily approached slowly, her steps cautious. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, with the weight of everything that had transpired. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Sophia turned to her, her eyes shadowed with something more than just fear. "It started," Sophia said softly. "I'm being watched. You're being watched. They know we're onto them. We don't have much time." Emily felt her breath catch in her throat. "It started." Those words rang in her ears, like the sound of a clock ticking down to a moment she couldn't control. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Emily asked, her voice quiet but steady. "You say we don't have much time. But what do we do now? Do we expose them? Take them down?" Sophia shook her head, her hands trembling slightly. "We can't just expose them. It's bigger than that. If we go public, if we tell anyone about what we know, we won't just be fighting Reed Enterprises. We'll be fighting the entire system. These people have connections in every sector: government, law enforcement, finance. They can destroy us without even blinking. So, what, we just do nothing?" Emily's voice grew harder. "We just let them win?" Sophia's eyes darkened, and she glanced around nervously before leaning in closer. "No, Emily, we don't do nothing. We hit them where it hurts. But we have to be smart. We have to play by their rules for now, at least until we have something they can't ignore." Emily clenched her jaw. This wasn't the answer she was looking for. She had thought this whole thing would be about taking down the system, exposing the truth. But Sophia was talking about playing games, waiting, maneuvering. She hated it. But she knew, deep down, that this was what the battle would require. "I don't have time for games," Emily replied, her voice cold. "What exactly do you want from me?" Sophia let out a deep sigh, as if she had been waiting for Emily to ask. "I need you to go after someone. Someone who works directly with Reed Enterprises, someone with knowledge of their most sensitive operations. Someone who's been with them for years." "Who?" "His name is James Kane," Sophia said, her voice trembling slightly. "He's their fixer. Their cleaner. If you can get him to talk, we'll have everything we need." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "And where do I find him?" "Right now, he's in New York," Sophia answered. "He's attending a gala for one of their partner companies. He'll be surrounded by their people, but it's our only chance. If you can get to him, if you can get him to trust you, we'll have the leverage we need to take them all down." Emily absorbed the information, her mind racing. Getting close to James Kane would be dangerous. She wasn't sure how she felt about playing the game, but one thing was clear: she couldn't afford to waste any more time. "How do I get to him?" Emily asked. Sophia looked at her with a serious expression. "I can give you everything you need: his schedule, his contacts, his weaknesses. But you'll need to be prepared. He's not someone you can just talk to. He's dangerous." Emily nodded slowly. Dangerous. She had dealt with danger before, but this was different. This was a world of corporate espionage, of powerful people who didn't hesitate to destroy anyone in their way. "I'll do it," Emily said, the words coming out with a resolve she hadn't felt in weeks. "But I do this my way." Sophia hesitated, and for the first time since they'd started this partnership, Emily saw something that resembled doubt in her eyes. But Sophia quickly masked it, nodding in agreement. "Your way. Just be careful, Emily. We can't afford any mistakes." The following days were a whirlwind of preparation. Emily threw herself into research, gathering everything she could about James Kane, the gala, and Reed Enterprises. She rehearsed what she would say, how she would approach him, and how she could gain his trust. Every move had to be calculated. One wrong step, and everything could fall apart. By the time the night of the gala arrived, Emily was ready. She wore a sleek black dress, the kind of outfit that would blend in with the elite without drawing too much attention. Her hair was done up neatly, and she applied just enough makeup to make her look polished, but not out of place. As she stepped into the venue, the lavishness of the gala hit her immediately. The room was filled with the kind of people she had never imagined she would be among: business tycoons, politicians, socialites, all rubbing shoulders as if everything in the world were theirs for the taking. But Emily's focus was on one person and one person alone: James Cain. She had studied his every move, memorized the details of his schedule. She knew he was nearby, just on the other side of the room. Her heart pounded in her chest as she scanned the crowd. And then she saw him. James Cain was exactly as Sophia had described: tall, impeccably dressed, his presence commanding the room. He was talking to several people, but his eyes were constantly scanning, always alert. Emily knew she had only one shot at this. Taking a deep breath, she made her way through the crowd, her steps purposeful, her body language confident. She had to act fast. And she had to be careful. One mistake, and she might never get another chance to stop Read Enterprises. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?